Alright, so I'm gonna get started on today's piece, which is going to feature Mareep and a blueberry muffin. And hello. And yeah, so I've done something similar before as an art print. Um, and I decided that it was a good enough concept that I could translate that into a keychain and sticker. And so for this piece, it's going to be pretty simple, just two elements, just the Mareep and the blueberry muffin itself. And so what I have here are the references that I'm using. So I have a few photos of blueberry muffins. One that I'm planning to use to reference the top of the muffin, and then another to reference the muffin liner. And then over here, I also have a sketch that I drew last night, just to plan out how I want the composition of the piece to be. I think I'm just gonna have Marie kind of hugging the muffin, and so that will make the sticker and keychain look fairly round, and that kind of helps emphasize, I guess, the cuteness and the fluffiness of Marie. So I wanted to keep it quite the length and the width of the keychain to be quite similar. I didn't want one to be longer than the other. So yeah, so those are the elements that I'm going to be working with today. All right. Let's see if I can get this. I'm actually going to save this as a separate picture, but I can reference it on a different window. Let's skip one moment. All right, so I got it pulled up in a separate window, so I'm going to start drawing now. I'm going to actually close out of this because I don't need it anymore. Okay. So as with every piece, the program that I'm using is Paint Tool Slide 2. It's a Japanese drawing program that's kind of like a very dumbed down version of, say, Photoshop. And I've been using it for quite a few years now, probably over a decade or so. I started using it back when I was in middle school or high school, I think, and it's just because it's so simple, it's just something that I like to keep using every day. I've tried using something like Photoshop before, and I just found that it was just way too complicated. The program itself was quite sluggish because it's so complicated, and it just had so many features that I didn't really need. So I just decided I wanted something a little simpler. All right, so let's get started then. And I guess first little tip I want to give is it's not a bad idea to fill your canvas in with a neutral gray. And that's just to give you, just kind of to ground your colors a little bit. The reason being is the way that I paint, I tend to paint my colors quite washed out, and I don't want that in the final piece. So I do like my colors quite vibrant. And so here, I'm just gonna start on the Mareep. Mareep is quite round and fluffy, so it really is just two circular balls, really. I can make that a bit bigger. I also pulled up a picture of Mareep. I forgot to do that earlier. Okay, I got a picture of Mareep too. Right. And I guess you'll notice that I don't really use lines at all. And that's just because Pokemon are pretty easy to draw. Their shapes are simple for a reason. The designers for sure wanted to keep it simple so that the shapes are easy for people to remember and to understand, and easy for people to, you know, draw fan art of, or just to appreciate. Because we also associate pets in very simple forms. You know, like a dog is often just, if you simplify it down to the simplest shapes, it's down to just the head and the body really, and a couple legs. So we don't really need line art, and line art I find tends to take up a lot of time. So for me, I find it most efficient to just skip the line art stage altogether. And of course, if you're doing something a little more complicated, you'll probably want line art. But for our purposes, we're fine without it. And here I'm just adding an extra layer. Oops. I'm not quite sure where I want the muffin yet. A little more yellow. I'm actually going to move Mareep's arms a little higher up because I think it looks cuter that way. Should I bring this back?
I'm actually not going to add the horns to Mareep just yet because I find they're likely going to be in the way later because I like to paint things mostly on a single layer. Um, if I add the horns now, what's going to happen is if I try to um, paint more of the wool, the horns, I basically have to end up painting around the horns to get to the wool, which I don't really want to do. It's just less efficient that way. And you'll see I've merged my layers, and that's just because I don't really like working with too many layers. I find it a bit cumbersome and it actually wastes a lot of time when I'm trying to, navigate through to the layer that I want. I just find it easier to keep as minimal layers as possible. So yes, Mareep will not look like Mareep for a while just because it's missing the ears, but that's okay. It's okay. It's gonna look like it's missing something. It'll look very fun. It will turn out okay. I'm actually gonna make it a little fluffier to match the sketch because I think I like how I did it in the sketch. So when I'm drawing Pokemon and food, I actually do like to paint the food before the Pokemon. And the reason is I find that because I'm using photo references for the food, I do want to get the feel of the piece in terms of like, if I fully render out the food, how do I make the Pokemon match that kind of rendering? I guess we could call it rendering. I don't think back when I was just starting out drawing, I don't think we called it rendering at the time, but I think that's just a common phrase these days to use. I think back then we just called it shading back in the DeviantArt days. Yeah, I'm kind of just experimenting to see what orange looks good. Kind of ties back to that reference that I showed earlier. Let's also add little blueberries. Yes, Marie will mostly be left as blobs for a good chunk of this stream, just because I prefer working on the food before the Pokemon. Just grounds the piece a bit more for me. Okay, that's what's on the line now. We're obviously not done the top of the muffin, but we don't want to like render just a single part of the muffin and then leave everything else. So pay a bit of attention to the liner as well. And at the beginning of the stream, I said it was going to be a simple piece, and I would say that it's relatively simple, but it is, I find, sometimes difficult to make certain foods look appealing as an art piece. And that's because some foods, they might not have, you know, like shiny components to them. Like a blueberry might be shiny and, you know, look really delicious, but then you have this part of the muffin where it's just a liner, and that's very dull, and it can be hard to make that look appealing. You just want to make sure that you just do your best. It's not much to it. And you don't have the shininess to kind of distract from the actual art. You do have to make sure that the art itself looks convincing, looks detailed, it looks like it's carefully drawn. Otherwise, you're just going to have an unattractive looking, dull looking liner. Well, we don't want that. Let's darken the bottom of the liner, just because we know that, you know, as you go closer to the bottom, it's likely going to be dark. Just because that's not where the light is hitting. When I first started drawing, I was quite scared to go really dark. And that's because I personally found dark colors unattractive. I felt that they looked muddy. And for me personally, I didn't like the color, but it's important to not just use, you know, the color schemes you may be comfortable with. You can't just use, you know, warm browns and warm yellows, and then not, say, use the cooler tones to help offset that color. So otherwise you get a very dull, piece. You don't have both the warm and the cool. I will paint a little more of the Mareep because bothering me just a little bit. So right now it's looking very incomplete. So we'll give the wall a little more shine. I'm not a traditionally trained artist. The only sort of real instruction I had was back when I took grade 9 art. I did a little bit of grade 12 before I had to drop it just because I needed to get certain marks and art was dragging me down just a little bit. It wasn't like a bad mark. It's just I just needed higher, so please don't take my what I'm saying here as gospel, because this is a lot of the stuff is just things I picked up over the years, you know, learning from either DeviantArt tutorials or watching YouTube videos. One of my favorite YouTubers for art is actually a guy called Marco Lucci, who he has these great instructional videos in terms of how to perceive light and color and how to get that into your drawings. And a lot of the theory that I learned was from him. one question that I get asked sometimes by other artists is what brush I use. And I think it's because for some of my final pieces, you can really see sort of the brushwork. And I guess that makes people curious. What I use is what I guess like how it shows in the final looks really, it's quite obvious, I guess. So in terms of what I use, it's called a flat brush, and all it is it's like what it says. What I said is just flat. It's just from start to finish. There's really not any tapering involved. There's a bit of a bristle look to it as well, but to be honest, I think I could function without the bristle. It's just I think it was I don't remember if it was a default brush per se. It could have been a brush I downloaded off DeviantArt that someone created, but don't recall anymore. Either way, any flat brush will work if you're going for this kind of look. And I just find that it's quite aesthetic, as you can see. You can see all my strokes. Let's give here a little more shadow. I think I shaped Mareep's face a little funny, so let's fix that. You'll notice that I don't render Mareep's eyes, and it's the same reason as why I didn't render the horns, because I know that I still have to work on the wolf, and because I work on a single layer for the most part, if I add in the ears and the eyes now, I'll have to paint around it to get to the wolf, so I don't want to do that. So I'm leaving those out for now. You'll see me flipping canvas a lot when I'm working on Mareep, and that's because the Mareep reference I'm using has her looking to the left. That's the only reason why. It's my brain just can't seem to flip the image. Mareep still looks really naked right now. That's okay. So we will fix her later. We'll move the arm a little bit. I think that looks a little cuter when the arms are together. It just looks like she's kind of like a cat. We'll come back to the Mareep. Gonna go back to the Muffin. So I think we've rendered out the Mareep a decent amount. So now we'll work on the Muffin. In terms of the size of the brush that I like to use, and I don't remember where I read this advice, but I actually use as big of a brush as I can to get the color in that I want at the time. So I'm trying to work with as big of a brush as possible, almost to the point where it's like uncomfortably large. And I think part of it is efficiency, but I think it also creates like a certain attractiveness to the art because it almost feels imperfect. Like I'm not getting these exact lines and it almost looks like it's not quite. Some of the colors might bleed into areas that they shouldn't be bleeding into, in theory, if you're looking at realism. But I think to achieve sort of that painterly look, sometimes you want that imperfection. You want the colors to bleed into places that you may not, you know, realistically want them to bleed into. And interestingly, this muffin reference that I'm using right now is actually the same reference I used for a reprint that I made several years ago. It's just a nice reference that I got off Shutterstock. Usually try to use Shutterstock so that I don't get in trouble. The last thing you want is people to claim that they're using their photos without their permission or without paying them. But for Shutterstock, because it is a stock photo site, I feel more comfortable doing that. I think the Mareep kind of match the blueberries a little more. I think I do want her to be less green blue and more purple blue. Also just bringing in some of the purples that I'm using into Mareep's wool. Just because lighter colors tend to reflect the colors of nearby objects a bit better than darker colors. If it was black, I guess in theory you could. It's like your artistic decision, but I like doing it more with light colors because I think it makes sense. And it just looks a bit more aesthetic because now it kind of feels more in line with the rest of the piece. And you kind of want to do that throughout the painting. You don't want the colors to just be isolated to the original color of the object. You kind of want, especially for the shadows, you want it to really interact with some of the other elements. Otherwise, each component will feel very isolated, and you don't want that. Let's add some shadow underneath the paws. And you'll notice here I go pretty dark with the shadows. And this does contrast my early days back when I used to be quite afraid of using black or very dark colors. And I find it just makes the piece pop a lot more. Gives it a certain realism because in real life, where light can't actually reach certain corners, you will see these very dark shadows. I believe they're called occlusion shadows, but don't quote me on that. And you can see already that just from adding those shadows, there's a certain realism that's been added to the piece. Certain, like you ground the piece and you bring the two objects together because you can see how one object interacts with the other in that it casts a shadow. So you kind of want to do that always. I think I will draw the horn, at least on the right side. So it is bothering me just a tiny bit that she doesn't have a horn. Just check my Mareep reference again. think I only recently really improved my values game the past few years after learning from Marco Bucci, which really helped me. Not sponsored, obviously. But I would recommend his channel for anyone trying to learn how to improve the way they paint. I think this horn is too big. I'm actually gonna shrink this. I guess I will render the other ear. So otherwise it's gonna look strange with just one. What's that size? I think that size looks good. Since this ear is in shadow, I'm gonna keep most of the colors pretty dark. What I've learned recently is that for the shadow color, it doesn't actually matter too much what the shadow color is. I think as long as like like if your light source is warm, as long as your shadows are cool, you can kind of play around with the colors a bit. Like you don't have to, like the shadow color doesn't have to be like the same as your base color. So you know here the fur, the fur is yellow, but I've added little purples so that it creates almost like this violet. And I think that's just more fun. You kind of fiddle around with it however you want. I will darken the values later in Mareep's wool, but for now I'm gonna go back to the muffins. I like jumping around. The one complex component I think of this piece is that the texture, sorry, the texture of the muffin can be a little challenging in that there's a lot of almost like little cracks in the muffin. It's made of like that crumbly texture. You don't have to paint every detail. It's not the point of art. The point of art is to simplify, but it can be a little intimidating to try to absorb all that and figure out how to simplify. So it's very faint, but in blueberries sometimes you can see spots of red. Don't want the shadows to be completely like purple blue. Like you do want a little bit of red, and gives it a little more depth. One of the tips that my grade 9 teacher once taught me was to paint what you see, not what you think you see. So just because you think a blueberry is round, it may not necessarily look round. It may not actually be round at a specific angle, or it might be less round than you think. So it's just important to stay faithful to the reference. Obviously, you know, for art, you do want to have your own interpretation, but there are limitations, and you do have to ground yourself to that reality too, in some instances. Color you can play with, but form is in some ways a bit stricter, I find. I find one thing that helps me when I paint is once I have the big strokes down with using my big brush, I like to vary up my painting using a smaller brush and then sort of defining some of the piece a little better. And that helps give it a bit of variety. You know, you don't want your entire piece to look like you only painted it with a single brush, because in reality, you know, even classic painters, they use a variety of brushes for different purposes. So it's the same with digital art. You want that variety and you want that flexibility depending on what you need. For me, for the most part, I stick to this brush here. That brush is what I use for probably 80 to 90% of the time. Just a good flat brush. Oh, that's why my minimum size was not even right. And minimum size just dictates how much tapering you want in the brush. For me, I like zero taper. I like it kind of blocky. That's why my brush felt a little odd today. It's fine. It didn't really impact the piece too much because it just kind of worked towards the look I wanted anyway. You'll see me use the color drop tool a lot to reference the colors I've already chosen and already painted onto the canvas. And that's because it's just easy, because I've already decided what colors I wanted in other parts of the piece. To make it more cohesive, I just color drop and then bring that into other parts of the piece. Basically, I always want to work big to small. You want to work on the big elements first so that you're not working you're not trying to work on the big elements once you've already painted the small ones. No, I don't color drop from the reference. I don't think you need to. Once you're used to seeing it, once you're used to kind of looking and observing, kind of already know what color you need to use. And if you don't, you kind of just paint over it and over again until you can figure out if you landed at the right color or the look that you want. You can color drop as a study tool, but in my opinion, I think it's better to just observe. Because it does really help as an artist. Sort of refine that kind of skill. I'll occasionally use this pencil tool as well if I don't really want too much blending and I just want that color like very harshly in there. Then I just use that so that I'm not like pressing as hard on the brush. It's just a little easier for me and it's a little more precise. For the pen tool, I do allow tapering because it's really my precision tool. But I do use it pretty sparingly. I don't love using it. I don't think it's as fun as the brush tool. The muffin looks pretty good so far. We will want to bring some of those muffin colors in to the Mareep's wool so that it doesn't look like two separate components and more like merged together. When I first, when I was a more, I guess, amateur artist, I was worried that some of the strokes that I was drawing didn't make sense. It's like, oh, will people even understand what I'm trying to convey here? But it's fine. You don't really have to worry about it. At the end of the day, people yes, they'll look at the details, but the more important thing is to zoom out of your work, zoom away once in a while, just like how I did earlier. And you just want to make sure that when you zoom out, nothing looks weird, because you can't expect a piece to end up looking good if from far away it doesn't even look good. Like logically that makes sense, right? Like um you can't work on the details really until the big picture is good. And then once the details are good, that's when you're confident that the rest of the piece will be fine. Or sorry, when the big picture is done, that's when you know you can work on the details and the whole piece will turn out okay, probably. One thing I am trying to work on more these days is to 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 move away from just being a slave to the reference photo and really trying to kind of free myself from it, in that, like, yes, references are important, but the reason that people go into art in the first place is so that they get to interpret reality, right? It's their concept of what it is. Sometimes when I vend at cons, I get people who haven't seen my art before asking me if it's AI, or sometimes people just walk away assuming it is AI, and tell their friends that it's AI. And I think part of it is because of how I paint, and that it's too close to realism sometimes, to the point where it doesn't look like human-made art anymore. Because I think some of the best artists out there are ones that it's not because they render hyper realistically, it's because their pieces, you understand what they're conveying, even though they are super stylized, or like you can tell that it's their style. And for me, I don't think I've achieved that yet. For me, I think sometimes I am still a bit too worried about deviating from the reference. So I think it's important to kind of let loose a bit, just enjoy sort of injecting your own expression into the art itself. I'm gonna work on the liner a bit. I am switching to the pen now. It's because the liner does need a little more precision. Usually when I paint like a full print that has a background, I actually don't use the erase tool at all. I just paint it over like I have a mistake with a different color, but because I do need the background to be transparent here, I can't have any sort of mistakes outside of the boundaries of the piece here. I darken the liners a little bit here. I'm locking the transparency so that it's easy for me to work with, because since I'm so close to the bottom of the piece, it's easy for me to kind of paint beyond the boundaries of what I've already set. So locking just helps me stay within the confines of the bottom. I'm going to go really dark here. Just a bit of realism. It's where you get to have a little bit of fun with the colors. Don't want a totally brown liner, you do want some purples going in there, just to convey the fact that there's probably bits of blueberry at the bottom as well, and also because there's shadow there, so I do want it a little darker. The nice thing about digital art is it's super forgiving, and that if you make a mistake, you can just paint over. It's not like watercolor where you're kind of committed. I only took a very brief watercolor class in one summer, I think. It was great. It took place in an art gallery in my town, and the instructor was very sweet, but the way the class was structured was that it wasn't a super technical class. It was more kind of like, here's what we're doing today, let's do it, kind of thing. And then the instructor would come around and give you pointers and stuff like that. But for me, I think it's just the way I grew up learning, and that I do like learning technique, color theory, things like that. So the lack of, I guess, formal instruction really was it's difficult for me. And it wasn't for grades or anything. I just took it because I was interested in watercolor at the time, and I think I don't recall, but I think I was employed at the time, but I just wanted a bit of an outlet, creative outlet. So I took it, And I don't regret it, but I don't know if I learned too much from it. Also, from the same instructor, I took another course for figure drawing because I did draw, like I did figure drawing, I did anime characters and character design in my own spare time. And I thought that was really fun. I think I did much better in that class because I had some um, knowledge already. The cool thing was, because it was a figure drawing class, they brought in real models. And those models, they would go full nude so that you can appreciate the human anatomy, and you had to be mature about it. My friends said they definitely can do it without um, being immature about it. And I get it. Like, if you're not comfortable with that, then it would be hard to not giggle a little bit. We did mostly or almost all female models. The only time when we didn't have a female model was when we had a substitute teacher for one class. I don't remember, but the main teacher was away for some reason, so the substitute actually brought in a male model, and it was really different, and it was actually quite challenging just because when you have a male model that actually, is like fit and lean and a little muscular, then you have to kind of learn or know some of the muscle masses. You can draw like from just looking, but without understanding the muscle mass, you're kind of just doing the motions. You're not really understanding how the muscles are kind of being stretched, or how when you change a pose, how it impacts muscle. So that was interesting. I did like that figure drawing class a lot. I didn't take it again just because I think I was busy after that. But if I had all the time in the world, I definitely would do it again. I'll need to add some shadows to the liner. Shadows and highlights. For highlights, I usually like to leave them closer to the end of the painting process. Because if you do it early, and then you have to, if you're still working on the shadow, then you're kind of just overriding the highlights. So once you're done your shadows and then you add your highlights, and you don't really have to worry. Highlights, you tend to have to be a little more precise anyway, so you kind of want to leave that for later. At least that's what I find to be the most efficient for me if I'm working on a single layer. It doesn't make sense to add in the highlights quite early on. Not sure.
the dark parts should be dark. Right now, some of them are a little light. Pretty sure there's a way for me to increase the brush size on like the buttons on my drawing tablet instead of me having to physically go to the right and like change using the sliding bar, but never figured out how to do it. I'm sure there's a way though. Here you can see that the highlights really help define the liner. You have to be careful in terms of using pure white for highlights. If it's not truly pure white, you probably shouldn't be using it. Like I know here I used it a bit too generously, and it's kind of making the liner pop out a little more than it should. So I'm just gonna go back and blend them in a little better. I drew my Mareep Muffin piece quite a few years ago, and I think if I recall at the time I was in a bit of a rush when I was painting it. I don't remember if it was because I was rushing to get it in for a convention. Usually when that happens, I unfortunately don't put as much care into some of my pieces. And I guess this time I am technically also prepping this for a convention, but I don't feel as rushed. I do have a few conventions coming up.
feel like I know this song. I definitely do, but I don't remember what game it's from. Zooming out. Looking pretty good so far. Just rotate it. I think the top of Mareep's ear can have a little shine. I don't think it's completely in shadow. It's not like the fur is completely blocking the light. And surprisingly, when I really started getting into art and studying it more carefully, I realized that art's actually very technical. You actually have to think about the logic of a lot of the of what you're painting, essentially. You can't just kind of do things willy-nilly. Kind of have to understand the physics of like how light bounces off certain surfaces and things like that. Like there's just reasoning as to why artists will paint things a specific way. Usually artists are actually quite logical. The value here is not enough contrast, so add a bit of contrast here. There we go. And get some of that muffin color reflected in the horns or ears of the Mareep. Make the piece a little more alive. So now that we did a lot of the painting for the muffins, you can kind of see that there's a mismatch in terms of the darkness of some of the blueberries versus how washed out Mareep looks right now. So we're going to darken some part of Mareep. Basically parts where light probably isn't really getting there. I want to really darken that. Especially where objects tend to touch, where there's points of contact. Do you want to darken that quite a bit? Spaces like here in between your little paws or hands. Generally, you're not going to see. The light is not going to penetrate through there. So it's basically pitch black. And a bit more shadow next to its face, because I don't think we'll be seeing much light there. So there should be a bit more weight to the shadow. See if I can make it fluffier on this side. And also make the face a little lighter so there's more contrast against the shadows. Made myself a coffee and forgot to drink. So here where the fur or wool is contacting the muffin, we definitely want to add some more shadow here, otherwise it kind of just feels like the Mareep is floating on the muffin, which we don't want. I want it to feel like it's really gripping. And you'll see that from my brush strokes, they're still really messy right now. I will be cleaning them up later. I usually like to do the cleanup closer to the end, because there's really no reason to clean up your shadows too much as you're painting, because everything's still a work in progress. If you clean it up now, you'll probably end up overwriting some of that cleanup as you're painting. So it's just better to leave it near the end when everything's pretty much finalized. At least that's how I do it. I find that's the most efficient for me. Let's give Mareep's face a bit more of a cast shadow on its wool. So I think that we need to darken the wool just a little bit, because the light source is coming from the right, top right. Then the face should be casting a shadow. The head, rather. And that's also why I leave cleaning up the edge work for later. Right now everything's just a wobbly mess. That's okay. You can see what the darkening the shadows really did to the piece. It kind of made the face of Marie pop out more. It also makes the piece feel a little more grounded, a little more real, not so cartoony. I'm always trying to aim for a still life look. Not quite fully realism, but realistic. Let's lighten up the wool a little more back here too. One tip that I learned recently was that for shadows, when possible, you should try to connect them, so don't make them feel like a bunch of disjointed or disconnected shadow. That way the viewer can kind of view them as one mass. And then it just helps the brain kind of absorb the piece better. I'm hoping to finish this piece tonight. Originally I was gonna let the stream go till 10. I'm guessing it's gonna take a little bit past that, but I think I will finish this piece today because it is a pretty simple piece. Usually when there's a background involved, it's a little more complex because it's an extra element. I'm gonna start adding little light spots here from my Mareep's wall, just because I think some of the tufts are going to catch that light. Not really sure how wool physics works, but I think it'll look fine. Because at the end of the day, we're not aiming for realism, so that's good. I will have Mareep looking down, I think, at the muffin. I want her to focus on the muffin. Alright, and then I'm missing her tail right now. Intentional, because I knew that I would end up having to paint over the muffin a little bit. So I did leave her tail out on purpose. So now I'm gonna draw it. I will draw it on a separate layer for now, because I might end up shifting it. Oh, I guess before I do that, I kind of want to saturate her horns a bit, because right now they're a little dull. I'm not the best at choosing the right color right off the bat. I think some people have a knack for it, but I definitely don't. So sometimes it takes me a bit of experimenting to get the right color. One little cheat that I like to do before I move on to the tail is if I do find that the colors overall look
washed out, I can go to filter and then just play with the brightness and contrast a bit. Usually I will increase the contrast. I might decrease the brightness a little bit. And then that kind of just helps make the color pop a little more. You don't want it too much though, because otherwise it looks a little unnatural. And then near the end, I'll also have a lighting layer to kind of tie everything together. Just a final bit of what the kids call rendering. All right, let's move on to the tail. Just debating how to curve it. This doesn't make much sense, does it? Basically, the tail is too short. Kind of looks like a bit like something else too if I put it there, so I'm not going to do that. So in the original sketch, I had Mareep's tail curling around the muffin, but I don't know if that actually makes sense. Like, she would have to basically have her butt pretty close to the bottom of the muffin. It's kind of too late to move her now. I do think I want... See if I can move her. Yeah, this is the downside of working with just one layer, is you can't easily move elements. But I think not having to worry about what layer you're on, all that is it's quite a time saver. Let's do before and after. So here's the second version. Here's the first. Zoom out a bit. Or after. And then before. Because I think the problem is the tail would barely reach the muffin. It's just too short of a tail, and you don't want to like extend the tail because the point of Mareep is it's kind of like round and quite stubby. So I'm not going to change the pose, like I'm not going to change the angle. Which means that I'll have to add the tail probably to the left. I don't really want it to go tailless, it looks much cuter with the tail. I'll have to shift the whole piece to the right. And then I think that should be enough room for the tail. Well, let's do that then.
See, the tail should actually be coming from here. And we'll have the ball at the end of the tail. Just about here. And this is where having a second layer is helpful, so that you don't accidentally paint over what you've already done. Okay, let's paint the ball. Give it a bit of a dark red shade first. Then we'll add a light yellow at the top. More of an orange, I guess. Let's darken it a bit more. Because it's like a shiny sphere, you kind of want high contrast in there. And we'll bring some of that lighter orange around the edge and bottom as well of the sphere.
lighten the very top with some bright yellow. Bring that yellow to the bottom as well. Just to show that it's kind of reflective. I'm actually not sure if this is the right way to paint it, but that's always been how I did this years. I will add more yellow just off to the side. Again, this is just sort of a stylistic choice. I've always done this, even as a kid, just have kind of two highlights to a sphere. I think one of my biggest wishes that I regret not doing was art back in university. I feel like it would have pushed me further much faster. I think as I am right now, I'm like an okay artist, but there's a lot that I don't really know from a technical level. I think this piece is okay without a plate. Originally I was going to. I don't know if the plate will add anything. There's already a liner, so I think I can get away without a plate. Can see the finish line. It's kind of creepy because I haven't done the eyes yet. Just gonna smooth out the shadows here. Basically, I should finalize the shading on the face before I work on the eyes. I guess in theory I could just do the eyes on a different layer. I don't know, I just don't really like layers. I use as few as possible because they kind of just slow me down. I'm not very good at registering like remembering like what layer I'm on and stuff like that. So, I also just like that colors just blend better when it's on a single layer. Okay, so the top of the wool on the head right now is pretty flat. Basically, I forgot to give it some color, so let's do that now. Just random splotches of color. As long as it's like the same value as the rest of the shadow, it really doesn't matter a whole lot what you decide. It's just kind of fun. It's where you can actually have fun. Give the shadows a bit of blue too, just to cool the shadows a bit. Dark colors, you're not going to see as much color reflected in them as a lighter color. So you don't want to go too crazy unless it's like your style. I think the piece is coming along pretty well. I'm gonna add a little more orange to the wool just to bring the piece together a bit. Oh, thank you, eyes. Just missing the eyes right now. And then I think after that it should be good. Just kind of finishing up on the colors. Alright, I think it's almost done. Smooth out the shadows in the face. I use Paint Tool Side too. So it's a PC drawing program. This is version 2, which it has some more features compared to version 1. The most notable one and the only one I really use though is the blur tool. But for the purposes of this, because we don't have a background or anything like that, I don't think I'll be needing the blur tool. My brush is small. This is gonna look a little creepy because I usually do the black part of the eyes first. Oh, hi, Amy. Yeah, sure, no problem. Don't worry. I will add the shine in a little bit. Does look very creepy, very alien-like. Don't worry, guys. Let's see here. Let me just check the color of Mareep's eye. In the official art, I think it's mid-brown. Like you can see like a very faint trace of brown. So I will do some brown. Let's see here. Let's do this. So instead of black, then let's make the top part of the eye have a dark brown. So it's not pure black. And then we'll make the bottom of the eye lighter. Lighter and more saturated. So it makes the eyes pop a little better. Yeah, I actually like to go pretty light on the eyes. The bottoms of the eyes. See how it gives it like kind of like a glow? It's lighter. And then to make it look like it has pupils, I'm gonna use basically like almost basically a white. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't hear me. I don't stream very often, so yeah, sorry if you notice there's any issues. So thinking about it, I think I will have to bring the yellow up a little further higher just so you can see it, because right now I guess you can call them pupils. The pupils are kind of blocking it right now. Hope you guys are well today. And I will make the, I think I will make the right pupil just a tiny bit brighter than the left. And the reason is it's less obscured by, you see this like cast shadow here? So it is gonna make the eye on the left slightly darker. Ah, yes, I am using Paint Tool Side 2. It's like a really simple drawing program, and it's literally like the user interface looks like it's from, I don't know, like 20 years ago, basically. But it works. So that's what I use. I think the eyes look a little buggy right now, so I am gonna shrink them. And that's the thing. If you keep it all on one layer, it does make it a bit harder to edit. So that's better. It looks a little less alien-like. Okay, so I do have to fix the eyes now that I shrunk them. I'm just gonna add a layer and put it below my drawing layer. Then I'm just gonna fill in the blue skin again. So it is a little more work. If you're planning to only use a single layer like I am, if you make adjustments like this, you will have to kind of go back in and make sure that you fix any holes or gaps. But I do find that I'm more efficient with just a single layer for most of the time. I find that if I work with like even 3 or 4 layers, that's when I kind of like start, painting on the wrong layer, and then I'm like, oh, I have to go, like I have to like move it, or like, it's just like, it's too much. I'm a simple girl. So we'll keep this pupil slightly darker. And I do still have to bring that yellow into the right eye. Let me zoom in a bit. So funny thing about the dangly charms is like I feel so bad because some people have come back to me saying that like the dangly fell off, and I'm like, oh no. I think part of it is because of the jump ring that I chose. So I think just like to stop that, I'm no longer offering the danglies, and I'm just doing like a single piece. As much as like I would like to do the danglies. So I really liked the concept, but I think it's just people tend to lose them a lot, especially if you like pull a little hard. So yes, I might so I have outsourced the assembly to like a manufacturer now. It used to be me just putting it together, and I think that might be partly why. So maybe in the future I'll bring back danglies, but for now I think I'm just not going to have them. Alright, let's define the eye a little better, because right now it's pretty blurry. And thank you so much for your interest in my art. Like honestly, it means a lot to me. Like, cause I don't always hear like what people's opinions of my art, so it's always nice to know. Really appreciate it. So in terms of the next stream, I am planning to draw tomorrow again. You guys don't have to tune in, obviously, like I'm sure you guys have your own like schedules and stuff, but I'll likely be drawing like almost every day, for April at least, just because I have some cons coming up that I do want to get the these keychains made for. So I basically have an April, like end of April deadline for me to get all these designs done and then sent to, you know, the sticker company, the keychain companies. Tomorrow will likely be the same time, around 8 to 10. It's just because like I have to cook after work, so and then I just need a bit of time to wind down a bit before doing this. I haven't decided what to draw tomorrow yet. Originally, I was going to do side up today, and then I was like, I kind of feel like something a bit cuter. I know. I just made gyudon, and it's so easy, but it's so good. Oh, what kind of curry you're making? So for myself, I like to make Japanese curry. I grew up eating like, I think my mom used, I don't know if it's like Thai or Indonesian or what, it's like a Southeast Asian kind of curry powder, and it was okay. But I definitely love like Japanese curry because I think it just fits my flavor profile, like my flavor preferences a lot more. Um, okay, vegetarian, that's healthy. Yeah, I usually like I do add like carrots and potatoes and stuff to mine, and then I usually like braise some beef with it. For my gyudon, I don't have egg, but I do have onion and beef, and then I just like you know, do the usual like the whatever the sauce is. It's like the sake mirin and all that. And see how like muddy this area looks? It just means I have to darken it a bit more because right now nothing is really clearly defined. There we go. There we go. It's debating whether I want to add a nose for Mareep. I guess I could do like a tiny, tiny speck here and here. Sure, that might not be the right position. That is not the right position. Let me fix that. There we go. Just gonna lighten it up a tiny bit. It's not as obvious. Paintersight 2, yes. So it is a PC drawing program. You definitely can use it on the PC. I'm not sure about Mac, but I'm using it on my like Windows right now, so it shouldn't be an issue. But honestly, like any program, like as long as there's like blending capabilities in the program, honestly, anything will work. But Paintersight doesn't really have anything special. I just like it for simplicity and like it's super lightweight.
It doesn't take like 50 years to open the program, basically. I tried Photoshop, and honestly, it was just like way too many functions for what I needed, and it just took forever to load. And just like, I also think it's just because I was a bit of an amateur too at the time, so I was just kind of frustrated at the complexity of Photoshop. And let's make sure that this part is a little darker. Okay, let's zoom out and just make sure that everything looks okay when we take a step back. It's basically like the best check. That and like flipping your image and making sure that there's nothing looking a bit wonky. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So I will up the contrast a little more, especially I think down here, I think is a little like soft, and I wouldn't say muddy, but it definitely could use a bit of pop. So I'm just gonna select the Mareep. I'm just gonna boost the contrast a little bit. Look at the little cheat code that I do. Yeah, so you see how like when I boost the contrast, it immediately makes it look better. It's because I tend to draw things quite washed out, so this really does like, it's a bit of a crutch, and I'm trying to only use it at the very end, but it does help a lot. Add a bit more black to this eye, just to give it a bit more pop. Let's actually move this pupil more to the left. There we go. Just to make it look a little more focused on the muffin. Alright, I think that looks pretty good when you zoom out. And it's especially important for like this kind of piece because I plan to make it a keychain, so it has to look good small. You can't even like not check it from afar. Just make the little sphere here a bit lighter since it's supposed to be really reflective. And then the last part is I'm gonna test it and see if I give it a bit of a border, if it looks better. So in Paint Tool Side, they have a feature called Water Fringe, where it essentially applies a dark, thin border around your piece. So I'm just gonna give that a try. And you can like barely tell, but it might be easier if I just make it wider. But basically, it's like this. You can make it like super wide, or you can make it super thin. And you can play with the intensity too. So if you don't want it as dark, but you want it thick, you can do it that way. So the only problem is you can't really control it very well. Like it's kind of like, it's not a very precise tool. So sometimes what I do is after I apply the effect, I just like merge it with a blank layer, and then that way it gets rid of the effect, but then it allows me to paint, like to kind of do like a custom like painting over that effect. Because at the end of the day, the effect is like, it's like a very rough kind of border around the piece, and sometimes the lines are a bit harsh. And if you don't use Paint Tool Side, an alternative would be like you can create a layer below your existing drawing layer, and then you kind of just paint in a darker color, and you make the border yourself around the piece. So that's also an option. This is kind of like a lazy way for me to create a border without me having to like do it from scratch. And I tend to use this more for keychains and stickers, because for those kind of products you do want it to pop a bit more because they're so small. It's sometimes hard to see details, so that's why I do that. For prints, I generally don't. And so I'm just refining that border that the program had done for me. And now it looks much cleaner and a bit softer. And I guess it's kind of working backwards in a way compared to some artists, because I know a lot of artists like to use lines from the start as a guideline for them when they're coloring. But for me, I kind of just like like going YOLO and just like literally not have any lines at the beginning and then sort of add it at the end as an accent to the piece rather than confining myself to almost like a jail of lines, you know? I'm just going to add a little bit of darker color around some of the highlights just to give them a little more pop
so people can see them a bit better. One thing I do like to do, and this is purely a stylistic choice, is I like to add a darker color around the cheeks of the character. And that like kind of makes it cuter, almost like it's like blushing. Because I don't want to use pink on every Pokemon, because not every Pokemon like it just looks a bit weird, I think, on Mareep just because the skin is blue. You could do pink. I just don't though. It's just a personal preference. I just like having like a darker color of the base. And kind of cutifies it a bit. And then also purely a stylistic choice, I also like adding like these like two little lines here. I'm not really sure why, like it doesn't, there's no like rhyme or rhythm to it. I just think it looks kind of cute. Kind of reminds me of like Ash from Pokemon when he had the squiggly lines on his cheeks. It's just like a little preference. I think the nose is not too obvious, because once you zoom out, you actually can't really see it. It's going to make it a little more obvious. And a little closer would be cuter. There we go. Looking good, I think. Looking pretty good. So, one last thing I'm gonna do is, it's a bit of a cheat. So in just a second, I'm going to add a layer here, and it's called the shine layer in Paint Tool Sai. I think there are similar blending modes in other software. I'm not really sure what they're called there, but in Sai it's called shine, and I'm basically going to add an extra layer of light, essentially. This is, I think, what makes, like, stylistically, it's definitely what makes my stuff pop a bit. Okay, so I will show you. Okay, so here I'm gonna make a new layer. And then on that new layer, I'm just gonna select shine. And then what I like to do is I like to select a kind of like a dark brown / orange. Okay, and then using a very, like, I use the watercolor brush here. And that's because it's like soft. It's not harsh like my brush. So I'm gonna create a clip here. What that does is it's telling the program that I don't want to color beyond the boundaries of the layer below it. So that's the Mareep and the Muffin. I want to make sure that the light is only going to impact them and not like
the gray outside. Oops. So I'm gonna apply this to basically the areas that I believe that light would hit, but also some of the shadow close to it too, because lighting will kind of seep through to the shadows. And that gives it like kind of like a cool glow. And it is important to hit the shadows too. That's how it feels cohesive. You just get that in definitely on the ball there because it's quite reflective. And I'm going to do the top of the muffin as well. So one thing with this mode is you might have to tinker with the color a little bit. So you see the blueberry, how it almost turns purple? I don't want it that purple. So I'm just going to select these blueberries here that I think are a little too red. I'm just going to down the saturation of it so that it's not so harsh. Right. And then I'm just going to rotate this a little bit, a little slanted. It's always good to just flip the artwork and check. One other thing I noticed is I think Mareep's horn here is just a tiny bit too high. Now look at the reference photo, it's actually down here. Didn't even realize. I think I treated it more like a, I don't know what I was treating it as, but this is a little too high, so I'm gonna bring this down. Yeah, that looks much cuter, doesn't it? Okay. Oops. Also going to lower this. The reason why I'm turning off the lighting layer right now is because it impacts my color drop. So if I'm trying to color, like pick the color, it'll try to pick the color of like the light impacted color, but I actually just want like the true like non-light impacted color, if that makes sense. No, I don't think that makes sense, sorry. I will also shrink this tiny bit. And then I'm gonna add more of the fur there, or the wool.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I keep clicking the wrong layer and I'm literally just working with like two layers. Quite annoying.
I think I have to lower this a bit more actually. Made the horns way too high. Do you think I have to shrink this horn a little bit? Perspective wise, we shouldn't see that much of it. Let me do a deform. There we go. It's a bit better. I'm also going to do deform here too. Just because like the angle that the head is, we shouldn't really see that much. Like we should see some, I guess you could call it foreshortening, where you see very little. It doesn't take up as much space because of the angle. Hard to explain. The cat's trying to get my attention. We like to spend family time together. But right now I'm ignoring her because I have to finish this piece. Check that again. I think that looks much better now. Might make the poof here slightly smaller. Because it doesn't have that crazy of a poof. So I guess it could, if you wanted to stylize it that way. Okay, so I'm gonna decrease the strength of the shine just a little bit. I think it is a tiny bit overbearing. Basically, this is what it looks like without. Oops, sorry. This is what it looks like without. So go down 10. Yeah, there we go. All right. So I am done this piece. This Mareep muffin piece. Actually, I am not. I need to add one more shadow below its little hands or paws. I'm not. I think they're just called feet, right, for sheep. Anyway, just need to add a little more. Otherwise, it looks like it's floating, which we don't want to do that. All right, Mareep muffins is all done. Thank you for watching. I'll be online tomorrow again at 8 p.m. Eastern if you want to join. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.